bright prospects for the European Union-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. And later on, mobile commerce inches upward in Vietnam.
Hello, welcome to another episode of BizLine on VTV International. You're with me, Dai Chung from Hanoi. And first, we're going to take a look at the economic headlines over the past week.
The Vietnamese Embassy in Belgium, in collaboration with the European Union or EU, the EU-Vietnam Friendship Parliamentarians Group, and European Institute for Asian Studies held a workshop in Brussels on Wednesday to speed up the signing and ratification of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, or EVFTA. Speaking at the event, Vietnamese Ambassador to Belgium, Vũ Anh Quang, emphasized Vietnam's commitment to ensuring a transparent business environment for European firms. On his part, Bruno Angelet, head of the delegation of the EU to Vietnam, said that to maximize the benefits of the FTA, Vietnam needs to promote intellectual property protection and compliance with the EU standards for agricultural produce. The EU did not use trade barriers to rebalance trade, but built a bridge to connect to Vietnamese partners through the FTA, which is considered a beneficial solution for all parties.
Officials of Vietnam and the Eurasian Economic Union or EAEU lauded the positive outcome brought about by the EAEU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement in more than 1 year and a half. The enforcement of the FTA was reviewed at a working session between Vietnam's Minister of Industry and Trade Trần Tuấn Anh and the Minister for Trade of the Eurasian Economic Commission, Veronika Nikishina, in Moscow on Monday. According to statistics of the Vietnam Customs, in 2017, Vietnam recorded a trade surplus of nearly $1 billion with the bloc. In the first 4 months of 2018, bilateral trade was at $1.53 billion, an annual increase of 35%. The two ministers asked for more joint efforts to clear hurdles for Vietnamese and EAEU businesses so that they can capitalize on the favorable conditions created by the bilateral FTA and bolster bilateral trade to $10 billion in 2020.
According to the General Department of Customs, in the past 5 months, rice exports reached nearly 3 million tons, an increase of 42% in terms of value and nearly 26% in volume compared to the same period last year. This is the highest it's reached in the past 5 years. Rice exports to Bangladesh rose 90 times in volume and over 60 times in turnover, while the Indonesian market saw a 200-fold increase in both volume and turnover. Vietnam's rice is sold at a higher price than India's and Thailand's. According to experts, this is a result of the high price of rice in the domestic market. However, if the domestic price does not go down in the near future, the competitiveness of rice exports will not be maintained.
According to the Ministry of Labor in Vallis and Social Affairs, on average, overseas Vietnamese laborers send remittances worth roughly $3 billion per year. Currently, there are about 500,000 Vietnamese workers working in foreign countries. Vietnamese laborers working abroad are mostly concentrated in Taiwan, China, Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. In 2018, the Ministry of Labor in Vallis and Social Affairs set a target of sending 110,000 Vietnamese workers to work abroad. Of the figure, female workers account for 40%. In addition, the ministry aims to improve the quality of work and strengthen the discipline of Vietnamese workers.
VietBuild International Exhibition opened in Ho Chi Minh City on Thursday, with the participation of more than 2,500 booths from nearly 800 domestic and international enterprises. Most of the products in the exhibition are environmentally friendly and are associated with sustainable development. The exhibition will last until June 25th and takes place at the Saigon Exhibition and Convention Center in Ho Chi Minh City.
According to the Vietnam Urban Development Planning Association, by 2040, 50% of Vietnam's population will live in urban areas. By the end of May this year, Vietnam had become home to 813 cities, including urban areas, economic zones, and industrial zones. Vietnam is predicted to lead Southeast Asia in terms of urbanization. Currently, improving the quality of human resources has become a pressing issue for Vietnam.
From the 19th to the 29th of June, the Vietnam National Administration of Tourism has organized a program to introduce Vietnam as a tourist destination to Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. The first activity in the program took place in Zurich, Switzerland on June 20th. The event attracted nearly 100 Vietnamese tourism enterprises. At the event, leaders of the Vietnam National Administration of Tourism introduced the beauty of Vietnam to visitors, including presentations on Vietnamese cuisine and the country's beautiful beaches. Last year, Vietnam welcomed more than 33,000 Swiss tourists, an increase of more than 5% compared to 2016. However, this figure is still considered modest. Through this event, officials hope to attract more Swiss tourists to Vietnam.
Those are economic highlights over the past week. Up next, we'll talk about the future prospects of mobile commerce and its payment options in Vietnam, which have been defined as the new emerging trends in e-commerce activities in the country in our crosstalk. Vietnam has 130 million mobile phone subscriptions, of which over 50 million have internet access, according to the Nielsen Vietnam Smartphone Insights Report 2017. This year's Vietnam e-Business Index report by the Vietnam E-Commerce Association also mentioned mobile technology as a significant contributor to e-commerce growth. Now, the state-of-the-art QR code payment methods and the mass adoption of smartphones are predicted to provide ample room for the development of mobile commerce in Vietnam. And people always carry their mobile phone with them, so why not to make a smartphone a convenient payment tool? Our Baseline episode today will provide in-depth discussion about the future of mobile payment in Vietnam. And our guest today, Mr. Dennis Brunetti, co-chairman of the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, or EuroCham, will shed light on the topic. He has nearly 30 years working experiences in the ICT industry and also over 20 years working in Vietnam. Thank you very much for joining us. We now start with a broad context of the general economic, macroeconomic situation in Vietnam, and also the mobile payment industry in the country. So how has the country been and where is this going?
I think Vietnam has experienced over the last 30 years a phenomenal journey when it comes to socio-economic development. And I think journey is really the key word, because clearly it's important to understand where Vietnam's been, where it is today and where it's going, as opposed to comparing it necessarily to other countries. And Vietnam in itself, I think the government and the enterprises in Vietnam and the young people and the population in general has really driven a very strong, enthusiastic and passionate growth curve for Vietnam. And I can't help but feel that a big contributing factor to that socio-economic development has been the influence and the impact that the internet has had. So the internet in Vietnam celebrates 20-year anniversary last year. Clearly that's, I think, running parallel with a lot of this socio-economic development. And the parallel basically is that more people have had access to more information, and through the mobile networks that were provided by companies like Mobifone and Vinaphone, Vietnam Mobile and Viettel, and certainly companies like Ericsson and other companies as well, of course, other vendors, have contributed to the 2G, 3G and 4G infrastructure development in this country. We've basically partnered together with the operators and expanded the mobile network coverage and capacity across the country. Enabling inclusive growth basically is important and happens through mobile access.
Mobile payment has been shaping into a clear global trend. According to a report by Gartner's research, by 2018, 50% of consumers in developed markets will use mobile devices such as smartphones or wearables to pay. In Vietnam, 4G technology covers 99% of districts across the country. Vietnam also has a young population which is adaptable to technology and has high rates of smartphones ownership at 72%. In terms of service providers, as many as 41 banks in Vietnam have been providing mobile banking and mobile payment services. 25 non-bank institutions provide services such as e-wallet, Momo from M-Service, and the QR Pay of VNPay. In terms of technology, most banks have partnered with fintech companies to deliver mobile banking services with the application of big data, artificial intelligence, over-the-top, or tokenization. The mobile payment market of Vietnam recorded 110 million transactions in 2017, up 81% in value compared to 2016. As we may see, mobile commerce and mobile payments have been an inevitable trend in the world and also Vietnam. However, the country is somehow lagging behind other countries, even compared to those in Southeast Asia. So how do you think about this?
In Vietnam, 20 million people have got mobile broadband subscriptions and smart devices, but no bank account necessarily. So that's a target market segment, clearly, that mobile operators are targeting. Why hasn't it really taken off yet in Vietnam? Clearly the benefit is the convenience. People don't want to have to carry large amounts of cash around. It's a lot easier and simpler to transact in a digital sense via mobile service or fixed internet service. But the drawback and the concern has always been around security. And clearly one of the drawbacks is security. But the other issue, I think, is also that there's about 45% of local enterprises in Vietnam that have websites, but only 19% of that 45% have websites that are compatible to mobile devices.
Yes.
So many of them are just not basically able to have their service or their product offering available on the mobile device for consumers to actually transact and buy from. And in Singapore, they have a thing called 3D service that's compulsory. Which basically is a protocol that links or ties the financial authorization to the online identification or authentication. So basically it connects the user's identity to that financial service. And in between, there's also, of course, the mobile payment platform, and that also needs to have that same security protocol embedded. So it's got to be end-to-end. In Vietnam, it's not compulsory today to have 3D service implemented. There's also the payment card industry data security standard. It's a long expression. Basically the acronym for it is PCI DSS, and it's 3.0, the latest version, which needs to be also implemented in Vietnam and made sure that it's adhered to strictly by all parties concerned. So once that's all done and people feel safe and secure that they can actually use their mobile service payment technique through their mobile device comfortably and securely and safely, then I think you'll see an uptake, quite dramatic uptake, I believe, along with, of course, more Vietnamese enterprises offering their websites or web pages on mobile devices that are compatible to mobile devices. That's the second big important aspect as well, which we talked about earlier.
So how will m-commerce and its payment system change the financial market and the payment system in Vietnam?
I think banks will still be banks, and banks will still, of course, play a big role in this. And in fact, in many cases, in most cases, the banks will partner with the operator, for example. And I think more and more, importantly, that will become an area that gets more attention from governments and regulators, especially when it comes to making sure that the players and the providers of these services have got the right licenses and the right authorization to do these type of things, because it's important, of course, to make sure that all payments are done properly, in a good way, in a safe way, in a secure way, but also making sure that there's no breaking of the law in terms of money laundering and other type of things as well that can potentially happen. So I think increasingly it's important to have all these players involved, whether they're mobile operators or banks or other financial institutions, over the top players, be connected in some way to a bank with a financial services license, for example, or a banking license, even for taxation purposes, for example. So it's important to have the right licensing and the right authorization in place.
So what industries will benefit from mobility and digitalization?
The future of our ICT industry is to digitally transform all other industries,
yes,
making them more efficient, more cost-effective, more affordable, more accessible to more people across the world. And in the case of Vietnam, across every aspect of Vietnam, whether it's an urban area or rural countryside, remote mountainous area. But when it comes to mobile payment, mobile money, clearly tourism, retail and gaming are three of the biggest industries that we see benefiting from mobile payment services. And
Why?
we've seen that because we've seen it and witnessed it in other markets. So in Africa, for example, Uganda, 40 million people, 5 million bank accounts, nearly 20 million, so nearly half the population now have mobile payment accounts through the operator called MTN. And in fact, Ericsson, my own company, that's why I know about it, is because Ericsson actually provided the mobile wallet platform to MTN some years ago that helped actually facilitate that. And most of the services, a lot of the services are gaming related, tourism related, retail related.
This company, VNPay, has been providing services to more than 40 banks, 5 telcos, and thousands of enterprises, but they are all domestic. Recently, the company signed a cooperation agreement with UnionPay International, making payments by QR code. Under the agreement, UnionPay cardholders can pay by QR code at nearly 20,000 accepted payment points of this company in Vietnam.
QR code itself is convenient, cost-efficient, and secure new payment technologies, which has been used in some other markets. And we see that this could match Vietnam's e-payment journey pretty well. And this is the reason why we would like to launch our QR code acceptance as well as on the issuing side as soon as possible in this market.
Các quốc gia láng giềng như Singapore, Thái Lan, Trung Quốc thì họ đã sử dụng các cái phương tiện thanh toán là mobile và bằng QR code. Và các khách hàng mà du lịch đến Việt Nam hầu như họ cũng đã có cái thói quen đó. Vậy việc VNPay hợp tác với UnionPay sẽ cho phép các khách hàng mà du lịch từ nhiều quốc gia trên thế giới đến Việt Nam có thể thanh toán dễ dàng hơn, từ đó kích thích việc bán hàng của các doanh nghiệp nội địa cũng như là tăng cái doanh số doanh thu của các điểm bán hàng trong nước.
Besides QR codes, new services that exploit blockchain, tokenization, and so on are soaring. A recent Visa survey on consumer attitude to new payment technologies shows that 9 out of 10 Vietnamese consumers are willing to try new payment methods.
Tài chính thì mình sẽ có những bài toán về sàn giao dịch và trade này, và sử dụng tiền, sử dụng thanh toán bằng token. Đấy là ví dụ như mình có một cái ví và thay vì mình sẽ giữ tiền thì mình sẽ giữ token của những cái bên mà cho phép thanh toán token đấy, ví dụ như bên Airbnb, bên Grab, rồi bên tất cả những cái hãng gì đó mà nó cung cấp token thì mình sẽ có một cái ví như thế.
Experts also suggested that there should be more cooperation and partnerships between fintech companies, traditional retailers and offline stores, and local commercial banks, and even startups to launch numerous partnership programs to promote the use of mobile payment.
M-commerce in Vietnam has also experienced significant growth with new concepts emerging. For example, e-wallets, QR code, non-touch payment, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain. So what are your assessments on these new developments?
I mean, they're all welcome, of course. I mean, it's always good to innovate. Disruption is good. Obviously the internet was a disruption in itself, and all these new services add to that. And I think, when the dust settles, obviously the players that provide the secure, safe, predictable, affordable, accessible, simple service will be the ones that survive, clearly, because that's what people want. They want simplicity. And in many cases, that's one of the other drawbacks of mobile payment today, in some cases around the world, is where you have a very complicated online authorization, authentication process or regime. So it's very important to keep it simple, keep it secure and safe, and ensure that you adhere to all the regulations and the government policies within that country. And of course, making sure that you partner. Collaboration is king, and collaboration is the most important aspect of all this, actually, because you've got so many players involved. So I see a future in most of those cases that you just listed, but it's too early to say which ones will be successful and which ones won't be successful. But the good news is there'll be options, there'll be choices. And the Vietnamese people, I think, will enjoy those options and choices, because Vietnamese people in general, and the government, of course, in Vietnam, by 2020, they want to reduce the amount of cash transactions down to about 10%.
But actually, with the conventional behavior of the Vietnamese people that prefer cash transactions, do you think that the government's target is ambitious?
Yeah, it's a fair point, Chung. I mean, I think in Vietnam people like to negotiate and bargain when they buy, and retailers offer discounts based on cash payment as well. So when you go shopping and stuff, you get that sort of incentivised cash discounted sort of behaviour. So I think from that perspective, it'll probably take a bit longer, but you'll be surprised how quickly things change. And I believe the younger population, especially as they get old enough to obviously be more involved in transactions and their purchase power increases, you'll find that the adoption rate dramatically accelerates.
So the questions here are no longer about the existence of mobile payments, but also how to manage and how to stimulate it. So how should the central bank, the State Bank of Vietnam, prioritize this type of payment?
I believe they've prioritised it. Clearly they have, because if the Vietnamese government is saying that by 2020 they want to have less than 10% of the transactions done via cash, that means they have prioritised it. They must have prioritised it. That would have to be done in order to be able to actually achieve that goal in 2020 or somewhere in the early 2020s. I believe they've prioritised it, and I believe, like you said earlier, it's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when now. I think clearly mobile payments, digital financial services are here to stay. They're going to grow in popularity, and as more and more people feel safe and secure using those services, the more simpler it is to use those services, the more people will use those services, more transactions. Already today you have about 33 million mobile payment transactions globally per day.
Per day?
Yeah,
yes.
33 million. So that's a hell of a lot. And you've got over 400 million mobile payment accounts globally.
The government of Vietnam, in many of its public announcements, gives a boost to mobile commerce and mobile payment in Vietnam as it helps the economy develop more equitably, prevent erosion in tax collection.
Chính phủ Việt Nam cam kết sẽ tạo thuận lợi và thúc đẩy xu hướng thanh toán di động tại Việt Nam. Thường xuyên đối thoại, làm việc chặt chẽ với cộng đồng doanh nghiệp, cả bên cung cấp và sử dụng dịch vụ thanh toán. Thúc đẩy việc cập nhật thông qua khuôn khổ pháp lý, tạo cơ chế và xây dựng các chương trình hành động cần thiết để tạo thuận lợi, quảng bá cho thanh toán di động nói riêng và các công cụ tài chính.
According to Nikkei, the support from the government together with global trends have strengthened smartphone usage in Vietnam in recent years.
Có tới 40% người đặt hàng là thông qua các thiết bị di động. Và con số này tiếp tục nó tăng với cái việc là cái thiết bị di động ngày càng trở nên rẻ và cái chất lượng mạng 3G và tới đây là 4G thì ngày càng tốt. Sóng Wi-Fi thì rất là phổ biến ở mọi nơi.
Businesses, in the anticipation of the trend, are the first movers.
Trong 6 tháng vừa qua thì VNPay có phát triển được hơn 20.000 điểm chấp nhận thanh toán bằng QR code, và VNPay sẽ cố gắng là hoàn thiện vào khoảng 100.000 điểm trong năm 2018, và VNPay sẽ cố gắng xây dựng cái hệ sinh thái để làm sao cái người bán hàng đấy cảm thấy đấy là một cái dịch vụ rất là tiện ích và họ tự nguyện đi đăng ký, thì khi đó thì đấy là một cái thành công lớn cho cái việc mà phát triển thị trường thanh toán bằng QR code ở Việt Nam.
Many businesses suggested that for such business plans to reach their goals, the government should do more in providing incentives and clearer regulations to ensure its safety. One that is being considered is to manage transactions on the National Payment Gateway, NAPAS.
Thông qua một đầu mối duy nhất thì nó là đảm bảo cái tối ưu về đầu tư của xã hội. Thì chúng tôi là đã và đang triển khai cái hạ tầng về số hóa thanh toán để sẵn sàng đáp ứng cho cái xu hướng về thanh toán số, xu hướng về ngân hàng số, cũng như là đảm bảo các cái yếu tố về an toàn bảo mật.
For such benefits, mobile payments, mobile commerce will continue to be the emerging trend in this year and the years to come. So how has the country prepared for such a change?
I think the key ingredients are there. So clearly you have the mobile networks, you have the mobile broadband networks provided by the operators with expansive coverage and capacity. So people have got access to a mobile broadband service. you've got very high mobile broadband device penetration in terms of smartphones and smart devices in general, very high internet usage, as we talked about earlier, and then of course you've got the need. You've got a growing middle class, you've got increased urbanisation, you've got people that want to actually buy and transact in an efficient and simplified fashion, so the desire is clearly there. And Vietnamese people in general, I find, are very, very open to new technologies and new services and new innovations. They try new things, they're always quick to learn and eager to learn. So I think it'll be a huge uptake in Vietnam. I think the main factors that will obviously determine how fast it takes up is the two things I mentioned earlier. One being security, of course, and having that confidence that they can use the service securely and safely. And the second aspect, of course, will be the availability of companies that actually provide internet transactions, mobile payment transactions on their websites, for example.
So do you have any suggestions for the development of mobile payment in Vietnam?
I think clearly collaboration is important, and not just between the mobile operators and the banks and the retailers, over the top players, etc. And there's a lot of players involved, and the providers of the actual mobile payment platform, I mean, they're important in all this, of course, as well. That collaboration is important, but you also need to have collaboration at government level between ministries, so Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Information and Communications, for example, Ministry of Public Security, ensuring that it's a safe, secure, well-regulated service, because that'll help people feel more comfortable using it. At the same time, it'll help eliminate fraud and other type of nasty things that, of course, we talked about earlier, in terms of money laundering, for example. I mean, these type of things you don't want to have, of course, involved in any market. And I think in Vietnam, the government would be wise to ensure that the ministries are collaborating seamlessly, as well as the main players in the ecosystem that I mentioned a moment ago. And then, of course, ensuring that 3D Secure, that particular protocol, is adopted on a compulsory level in Vietnam, as it is in Singapore. So I think Vietnam can actually gain a lot of experience from the Singapore market. Singapore's only got somewhat 6 million people, or less, and Vietnam's got over 95 million. It's a huge market. A lot of players are coming here and they all want to contribute to this particular service offering. And I think the government, if they can regulate it and manage it and integrate the way they work between the ministries, they can really help, I think, attract more investment from European firms, I can speak for on behalf of Eurocham, but also from other countries in Korea and Japan, of course, as well. So clearly this is a growth area, and it won't be missed by the Vietnamese government and the Vietnamese people. I think it's going to be embraced big time, and there's no doubt your banking, financial institutions, operators, and certainly the government as a whole are very keen to make this happen in a good way, which is why they've set themselves a very ambitious target for 2020.
Once again, thank you very much for joining our BizLive program today.
Thank you very much.
Now, the Vietnamese government has set an important target of creating a boom and universalizing mobile commerce, contributing to bringing the ratio of cars on the total payment side to less than 10% by 2020. Now, experts have suggested 3 key pillars to mobile commerce strategies in Vietnam: educating stakeholders about the value of electronic and mobile payment, building the number of locations where mobile payment are accepted, and bringing new payment technologies to the market. Meanwhile, the government would also create the necessary legal framework, mechanisms, and essential action plans to promote mobile payment in particular and e-commerce services in general. And that's also wrapped up this edition of BizLive. Thank you very much for joining us. In the meantime, do log on to VTV4.vn or our YouTube channel at VTV4Go for more of our updates. Goodbye for now. Thank you very much for joining our show. Okay.